This is the Business Storytelling Show with Christoph Trapp. Name a top 20 storytelling podcast and a top 5% podcast globally, Christoph chats with thought leaders and experts to share tips and tricks that can help you tell your company's stories better to drive business results. Available wherever you listen to podcasts, live streamed on major social media channels, and part of the DB&A television network, available on most U.S. television sets and streaming on Roku and Amazon Fire. Here's Christoph with today's episode. Let's go.
Let's go, business storytellers. Fist bump. Let's get today's episode started. Now, we want to talk about the future. I'm always very interested in what do we need to know? How do we prepare? How do we move forward? And I recently finished On the Verge, Rebecca Costa's book. It's also available on Amazon in the carousel if you're watching on the Amazon live stream. Otherwise, just head on over there and Google it to find it. I did a quick review of the book. I want to show you my video review instead of just me rehashing what I already said. Hey, shoppers, readers, Christoph Trapp here. I want to talk about Rebecca Costa's On the Verge book. I have to say, my mind is blown. So it's not so much about predicting the future, like what do we think may potentially happen, but seeing the signals, seeing the signs, considering what has happened in the past. How do you pre-adapt? So fantastic book. And her examples are very, very relatable. For example, she gives an example of her dog, how the dog reacts when she travels, when she leaves, and then how does she think about the future, how to handle that situation differently, how to predict winter, right? You don't want to pull your suitcase through the snow, for example. So it's really a fantastic read. Check it out. So much stuff to learn. And, from a storytelling perspective, the examples, the stories, they're just very relatable. So much to learn. Definitely so much to learn. Of course, we have Rebecca on the show today. What I want to know from her as we get started here, why is it about understanding the future versus predicting the future? Why is that such a very eye-opening, mind-blowing thing? Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, it is mind-blowing, and I'm afraid that our institutions and our biology is not quite ready for knowing the future. As you know, we've been fascinated with what was going to happen next for centuries, for as long as we've been modern man. We've hired psychics and fellows like Rasputin to try to tell us what sex our next born was going to be and who was going to win the next war. And the reason for that is because there's no greater advantage in business, in leading a nation, in your individual life than full knowledge, 100% knowledge of what the future is going to bring. That allows you to take an action in the present to change a negative outcome, protect yourself from a danger, or get the jump on opportunity when you think about it.
So, of course, I am always the fan here of absolutes, and you threw 100% at me. Is that a thing to be able to know 100% certainty what will happen?
Yes, we're getting there. And that's the really fearful thing. When we look at mass shooters, think about the mass shooter in Las Vegas. We have a tendency, once the negative event has occurred, we go backwards. And then we say, oh my gosh, there were all these signs. In that particular case, that shooter, he sent his live-in girlfriend back to the Philippines with a couple $100,000 and said, don't come back. He started buying tracer rounds. He was taking some antidepressants that should never be given to someone who has a family history of psychotic behavior. It turns out his father had been a very well-known sociopath who spent his life in jail and shouldn't have been given those medications. So we can see that 3 months before he got the medications, he started buying tracer rounds. He he moved 27 times. All of these things were pointing toward criticality. And we're getting very, very good just at taking public information, not private information. I'm not talking about getting into your medical records, just public information. In fact, we've gotten so good that a company called Recorded Future was able to predict the Arab Spring within a couple of months. You can imagine they got into no private data, just simply looking at data that's available in the public stratosphere. And the reason for that is we have amassed so much data that when you start connecting all of these data points, it goes to pattern. We're able to predict with 95 and 99% certainty that an event is going to occur. What we don't have is the ability to respond to that. We don't have the institutions, and we don't have the mindset that we can get in front of these events.
Very, very interesting. So, I mean, it's when I heard you talk about that, it's a little bit like when you know somebody for a long time, right? Like, let's say you have worked for a boss for a long time, and there's a new employee coming in, and you're like, you can almost predict 100% based on the situation how the boss will react, right? If you have worked with them for any amount of time, because you know
Well,
what
sure.
they've
Many
done.
times you're making decisions on behalf of your boss, right? You're
Yeah.
saying, my boss or my boss's boss wouldn't like this situation. They would want it to go this direction, right? So, anticipation is something that modern man has developed in spades. And the reason for that is obviously going back to our survival, right? If I can anticipate a predator is on my pathway as I'm returning back, right, to my village, I can be prepared for it. I have a better chance of surviving an attack from that predator. So instinctively, we want to know the future. We've always wanted to know the future. The difference now is there is so much data, and we have artificial intelligence that is telling us with 99.9% certainty many times that an event is going to occur. And then it does occur. And my problem with that is if the event is avoidable and it is negative, such as a mass murder or such as a massive collapse of financial institutions, such as a virus spreading, if we can get ahead of that and we have the knowledge and the technology to do that, what are we going to do? How are we going to behave in the future to head those problems off?
And of course, that is where we see some of the media coverage when the FBI or whoever, the local police department, had these signals and they didn't respond to it, or something like that. Now, let's dial it back a little bit, if you don't mind, from natural disasters and like those real big problems out there. I don't want to say politics, but yeah, at the political level, I guess. But for companies, as companies are trying to do that for them, how do they do that? I mean, how do I, as a company, look at the market and predict or understand rather what I need to know down the road?
Well, I consult for a number of large global corporations, and I'm always surprised when they bring me in and I ask the question. It's a very simple question, but the answer is always shocking each and every time I go into these corporations. And I go in at the top level or at the board level, and I ask them, what is your process for performing reconnaissance? And they generally kind of look at me like, well, what do you mean reconnaissance? I say reconnaissance about the future. How are you getting data about what technologies, sciences, changes in the marketplace, consumer trends? What is your formal process for gathering that data and bringing it into your corporation? And generally what I hear is things like, Well, we send people to trade shows. And everybody knows what that's about, right? You go to a trade show and you walk up and down the aisles and you collect some tchotchkes and you look at stuff and you hope you run into something that might be relevant to your company or might be feasible for you to execute. And then, but you only send, think about the percentage of people you send from your company to a trade show, right? And then, of course, COVID happens and the trade shows all shut down. Or you might read some journals. Actually, the amount of reading you would have to do to stay on top of future events is more than the hours you put in at work. So that isn't really working, right? So you might catch something on a video, or you might hear a competitor's making a move. That's the worst one because you're already behind. But generally speaking, by the time you hear about something that's going to be a great disruptor to your life as an individual or to your corporation, you are late. You are in a panic mode now. What is this? How are we going to incorporate it? What are we supposed to do about it? I mean, think about it in the IT organizations. Containerization. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about containerization in the IT world. Guess what? People were working on containerization 5 and 7 and 8 years ago, right? You weren't on top of it. So by the time you hear about it accidentally, you run into it, you read an article, you go to a trade show, you attend, you go online to a podcast like this, you're way late. So I ask people, what is your process for getting that information as early as possible? That means, and this is going to kind of blow everybody's mind, that means, are you monitoring provisional patents? It means, what is your visibility on research going on in major universities all over the world? And by the way, when I talk about patents, I mean patents all over the world, because a disruptor isn't necessarily happening in your country, right? It isn't necessarily happening nearby or even in your language. So you have to monitor these things. You have to monitor patents. You have to monitor research that is going on. You have to monitor where venture capital money is going. I many times go in and I go, do you know where venture money is flowing right now? People look at me and go, no, we don't, we're not tracking that. I go, good idea to start tracking that. Make friends with venture capital companies. Have them come in and have their analysts tell you what they think the future disruptors are, because they're betting on them. They're betting their money on them. And these are huge portfolios. So you have to bet on the science, and you have to bet on where the money's going. And there has to be a formalized process. Now I'm going to stop here for a minute and tell you why there isn't one. Is that okay?
Yeah. Please.
Okay.
I was going to ask you that, actually, though. That's
I'm
a
going
good
to tell you
transition.
why companies don't do this. Is everybody listening? Because this is the big gotcha. It's called institutional resistance. Corporations are a lot like humans. We're Pavlovian. When we start out, we're making a product or a service, and we've got to jump on the market. We have an advantage, right? And we brand that advantage. And that advantage becomes part of our identity. And so we get more and more efficient at doing the thing that made us successful because we're rewarded for it. So for a period of time, our growth is dependent on getting better and better at doing the same thing the same way. And then something changes. The science changes, the market changes, consumers change, something like COVID hits us, and something changes in the marketplace. And it is amazing that everything the corporation has done is driving toward repeating the process that has made them successful. That's called institutional resistance. And so when something new comes in, there's not only no process for handling the new, there's alienation and there's aggression to kill the new thing, because the whole corporation is built behind not doing the new thing, even when the methods they were using before, the services they were offering, the products they were offering aren't working as well, and sometimes aren't working at all, as in the case of Kodak. Everybody knows the story of Kodak. Kodak actually invented the digital camera. Their scientists invented it. And when it was presented to the executives and the board said, have you not seen we make all our money on film and film processing chemicals? Get rid of that thing. So that is a classic example of institutional resistance. All the manufacturing facilities, the way the sales force was organized, distribution, everything was around film. They could not make the transition. They couldn't think of anything worse than digital photography.
And it still happened. Yes, those stories, unbelievable. Now, when we talk about a process like that, though, how do we start in a company? I mean, I already can see people screaming at me, "Oh, we don't have enough time as it is." Same here. I don't have enough time as it is either. But how do we start it? How do we integrate it? Who should own it? What's like the workflow? How do you get it into the company?
Well, I'm going to tell you an example about one company. It's a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. You would think pharmaceutical companies would be all on top of disruption in science, but it's a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. And they heard me speak about this, and they're one of their top vice presidents who had been with the company for 30 years said, we have institutional resistance. He raised his hand and he said, absolutely. Pharma companies, because they're so heavily legislated and they have so many laws, that they're very conservative, probably the most conservative business you could get involved in outside of insurance. And they're, inextricably tied together. And so he said, we have this problem. We talk about new sciences and we talk about, new disruptions that are coming, but it's very, very hard to get the company to move quickly. And so what happens is we're always behind, and we're actually falling behind in a dangerous way, as in we may become irrelevant. And it was a really brave statement for somebody who'd been with the company for 30 years and was an executive vice president. That level of honesty was just refreshing for me. And so I said, well, what do you think it's going to take? And he goes, I don't know. We show slides. We talk to the board. I don't know what it's going to take. And I said, well, you know what? Give me permission to bring in 4 or 5 small startups or inventors in universities, bring their technology into your boardroom so that they can touch and feel it. And they don't think this is something in a magazine that, that there's 10 more years to get ready for this change. And I said, let's try that. Let's actually have a hands-on experience. So they hired me to curate, and I had a team of R&D, researchers, and we went and we combed the globe for relevant patents that could really disrupt their industry, for new technologies. We talked to venture capitalists. We did all the work that I was telling you about earlier, and we brought in 4 companies. And not only did we bring in 4 companies, we brought in the founders and inventors of those companies, and they brought in their product or their invention. Mm-hmm. And the executive team, all the from the president and CEO to the board of directors, gave us 1 day. We said 1 day a year for innovation. And they came in at 8:00 in the morning, and boom, boom, boom. Each of these companies came in and handed them the product, whether it was VR glasses. Now, VR glasses, I'm talking 10 years ago, right? But whether it was VR glasses or it was an actual protein that when it hit your tongue, it immediately began to expand and made you feel full. You just ate one little cracker and you felt like you ate a steak and mashed potatoes. And they experienced it. And they realized, we don't have 20 years to get on top of this. In fact, 2 of the companies were just inventors inside of universities. And they basically said, for the rights to that technology, we'll bankroll you, which was great for the inventor and great for them because they were able to seize that opportunity before the fact. Those are the key words. Before the fact, you want control. you want to pre-adapt to what the future is going to, because it's not like those inventions are going to go away. Somebody's going to grab them and they're going to be your worst nightmare. So it's either your choice to get on top of it and find where they are and what they are, and then grab them at a discount price and own them, right? Own that advantage. That's what predaptation is all about. So it might start as simple as curating and bringing these companies in and say, what do we plan to do about this? Force the question, right? What do we plan to do about this? It's not nothing, because nothing is a decision. It's a decision to let our competitors get it. It's a decision to have it hit us up the side of the head in 1 or 2 years. All of these inventions are going to hit us in record speed time. So we can't make no decision, but the worst is not to be aware of them. So at least be aware of them, make a decision, act on them early.
So, I mean, you don't have to convince me, but I'm thinking about, I grew up in the newspaper industry, which when I left the official B2C newspaper industry, I've been in B2B publishing since, it's been decimated 50%, I think, in the United States in the last 14 years or whatever it's been. I mean, there were people who said, oh, we can just wait it out until retirement. And I'm not picking on the older generation here at all. I'm getting close to the older generation. But they were people who said that. They were people who said that in their 40s. They still got a ways to go.
But that's institutional resistance. Think about it. You've got presses running. You're buying paper. Everyone working for the newspaper, right, is there to make newspapers, not to make podcasts, not to enter the digital world. The entire infrastructure is built to resist change. But change is going to happen, whether you resist it or not. So if you bring in, right now I'm getting a lot of questions about the metaverse, right? Mm-hmm. How's the metaverse going to affect us? Big. This is not just going to affect gaming. This is going to affect how you train personnel, how you interview people. This is going to radicalize how you interface with consumers. Everyone is going to have a digital surrogate in the metaverse. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, we need to do more on Facebook and Twitter, that train left the station 2 decades ago. Leapfrog. Take all those people that you've got working on social media and put them on the metaverse.
But how do we get people to change, or do we just need sometimes different people? Do we need, I had a little bit of a flashback when you said they had 1 day of innovation, and I get it. We all have our baggage, but I thought about this one team of 3 people, and they're the only ones that work on innovation. Everybody else is just keep pushing the old thing. I actually think, not to pick on newspapers any longer here, but it's how you frame it, right? I'm not a writer. I'm not a reporter. I'm not anything like that. I'm a content strategist. I'm a content creator. Sometimes I do a podcast. Sometimes I write an article. Sometimes I write a print article, believe it or not. Just finished one the other day. Sometimes I do an e-newsletter or newsletter. We don't need to have the E in there anymore. But do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's how you frame it. Like, who are we? I mean, if you're in the printed photography business, of course, you're going to fight everything that doesn't have something to do with it. But if you're in the photography business, maybe you have a chance to change your mind. Or am I just making that up?
I think everybody, if you look at their job titles these days, everybody's got multiple job titles. Somebody, because of my book, The Watchman's Rattle, which happened before On the Verge, I had predicted what are the signs, right, that we now know indicate that a society's on the verge of global collapse. Again, not personal data, but just public data. Do we see that there are early signs that trend toward that? And then someone said, she's a futurist. Well, I don't talk to dead people and I don't read tarot cards sometimes when you say you're a futurist, but I've discovered that more and more companies are hiring futurists because they feel as though The people who want to innovate inside their company don't have the power, don't have the authority financially or power-wise to be able to affect the change, given the entire infrastructure of the company is going to resist you. I mean, that's the reality of it. That's the Pavlovian reality. The entire infrastructure resists change. That's because it's been positively reinforced, sometimes for 50 or 100 years. Are you kidding me? You're going to come in here and say, all right, newspapers are no more. I mean, that's really a tough pill to swallow, and it isn't going to work. So many times you have to bring in somebody from the outside who has no skin in the game and can basically say, all right, you can go down the path of newspapers, but I'm going to bring in some things for you to experience. And then I'm going to ask you, are you still going to go out and buy a newspaper? Really? So perhaps if someone had shown them a podcast or put VR glasses on them, or they experienced the metaverse, if they could just really experience the fact that the world is changing. But that's not the only thing. Bear in mind, you've got to assign people. You have to actually put money into the future. You can't wait for the future to happen. You have to assign people that are responsible for bringing that information into your company. Think about it when you go into a war zone. This is a little bit like a war zone, right? You're going into the unexpected. And now you're a team leader. You've got to lead that team. You don't just march your troops in. I mean, look what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine right now. We have all of this information. We're sending single individuals in to perform reconnaissance. And what do those people do? They bring that data back so that the leaders can be effective. And that is really important, and it's broken in most companies. You don't have people assigned to perform reconnaissance. Bring back that information so that you can carve a safe path for your company to navigate.
And certainly when you're in a company that is indeed, a hard position to be in, can be very straining every time anything has to change or we have to look at those things. Rebecca, it was great to have you on the show. Everyone check out her book on Amazon, and I think it's on her website, RebeccaCosta.com, I believe.
That's right, myname.com.
Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review our show on your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to share this episode with your networks. We appreciate you. Until next time, let the best stories win.